Hello, my name is Sheena Jensen, and for my final project, I decided to do leadership for gender issues in education. The two articles that I picked came from Education Week. The first one is Breaking the Gender Labeling Habit Early, recently published last month. And the second one was Same-Sex Marriage Cases Hold Implications for Schools, which was published back in March. The first article mainly stemmed from a recent case in Massachusetts where the Department of Education grants the right to transgender students to use restrooms, locker rooms, play on athletic teams of their choice, to be called by their preferred gender-specific pronoun, and to be called by their preferred name. So it's giving these transgender students more of a personal choice. Some proposed changes were using words such as class and friends instead of girls and boys, not praising for physical strength but for academic success and kindness, alternating sorting practices. Here's a quote that I picked from my second article. It says, "The idea of what a family is has evolved enormously over the past several decades in this country. Many children do not come from intact families with a biological father and mother. They are being raised by grandparents, step-parents, and same-sex parents. The job of educators is to make sure all of those students feel validated and accepted." I think as far as gender identity and equality in education and how that ties into leadership, the things that we have been reading, mainly I used information from our Leadership Theory and Practice book. I think from the two articles I read, it's a lot easier to implement these changes in the high school setting. It seems to be a lot less clear when it comes to implementing with younger students. And as leaders, administrators, and teachers in those schools, it's a little bit more perplexing as far as how they're going to implement and be leaders in this change. I think the article stated, the first article about Massachusetts stated that we really need to rethink common elementary school practices such as sorting and labeling to help prevent stereotypes. In chapter 13 of our Leadership and Theory book, it talks about social character changing from a formal bureaucratic character where we have a formal traditional two-parent male and female mother-father figures, with the father being more dominating over the family, to more of an interactive social character that has more diverse families. And in this social setting, individuals are more free to move about and make their own individual choices. The chapter also talked about the changes in leadership that will need to occur because of these cultural changes. And some of those changes include leaders being more empowering of their subordinates, so going from a more directive type leadership to a more supportive type leadership, where more collaboration, where leaders look for more collaboration from their subordinates instead of being directive and telling them what they need to do. Social justice and leadership. From the two articles, I gathered that it's the responsibility of leaders to consider and be sensitive to gender identity. And leaders through the school are going to have to be the ones to implement these changes. Right now, even within our education system, most of the management in the business world, education, and organizational areas tend to be male-dominated thinker management. And in a thinker-dominated world, there tends to be more of the gender bias. So making that leadership change to a more collaborative type leadership where it's more supportive is going to be difficult because of that thinker-dominated business world aspect. I'm a classroom teacher, so as I was working on this project, I was thinking, what's the implications for me in my classroom? I teach high school, and I liked this quote from our leadership book from chapter 15. It says, leaders need to understand business, political, and cultural environments worldwide and be able to work with people of many cultures. I think these gender identity issues are changing our culture. We are going from a more traditional family cultural setting to more of this interactive social character setting, where we have students that are coming from very diverse family backgrounds, and more gender identity issues are arising in our culture. And so as leaders of our schools, as a leader within my own classroom, I need to be sensitive of that, and I need to understand that to be able to lead my students, to be able to give them their free choices. I need to be able to understand those cultural environments that they come from to be able to lead them correctly. Challenges that I saw, and as I read through chapter 15 in the book, it talks a lot about prejudices with followers. So as relating it to me in my situation as a teacher, as we are more open in giving our students those choices, like let's say in Massachusetts, where we're now allowing students to be able to choose which restroom to go into based on what they identify with, there could be prejudices that come up from other students. My second article talked about the fact that 86% of bullying issues involve gender identity students, is what they're labeled as. So I think, the whole bullying aspect and other prejudices in that case are going to play a role. And that's the follower against follower. Follower against leader could become an issue as well within the classroom, when you have a teacher that might be supportive of a group of students. You will have other students that don't agree with the teacher's point of view, and then leader to follower, where you may have teachers or administration that is insensitive to those student choices. And so that's another leadership challenge that you might have as an administrator. If you have a teacher that is not being sensitive to student choices, that would be where the leader or the administrator would need to step up and maybe be more directive in that aspect. And then finally I put on there breaking habits. The first article was all about breaking the habits of, calling the students boys and girls, or separating them. Even in my own classroom, I play many games, and a lot of times we'll separate, girls versus boys. Even the students themselves will separate them that way in challenges. And so being sensitive to not be labeling, I think is important, but it's a habit. When you're used to calling and using gender as an identification factor, it's a habit that will have to change. And as leaders, I think me as a leader in my classroom, I need to lead by example, and be able to show my students other ways to separate and other word choices to use. The references, like I said before, I had the same-sex marriage cases hold implications in schools, breaking gender habits early, and the leadership theory and practice.